2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn dope into DFS pros.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Taco Tuesday PGA DFS podcast presented to you by DFSArmy.com. We are in our second to last event in the West Coast swing here. Before we finish things off with the Genesis Open next week, we're headed to Pebble Beach, one of the most iconic courses and events on the PGA Tour. And we're getting ready to break it down. It's another multi-course event. But first, just got to remind you about DFSArmy.com. Come check us out for access to all of our premium tools and articles, the Research Station, which I'll be referencing throughout this pod, and the Domination Station Lineup Optimizer, along with free access to all of our premium content for every other daily fantasy sport out there. DFSArmy.com, promo code TACO. Go ahead and use the link in the description. Have that available for you guys. Now, onto the course breakdown here, and that's going to be a really important part of this pod. We're back to a similar event to the Desert Classic we had a few weeks ago, a 3-course event. Pebble is the main course that guys will play once during the first 3 days, and on the last day, they will all head back to Pebble Beach, and that is quite the course. It's got a lot of things that are very, very unique about it, and unfortunately, just like with the stadium course in the Desert Classic, it's the only one that has shot link, and you know that all of the bigger studs are going to be playing there on Saturday, most likely, to get eyes on the TV for the weekend when that goes to major network coverage. But you've got Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill, and Monterey Peninsula, and a lot of these courses are quite different, and they have different strengths and weaknesses, but one thing they all have in common is they are very, very short. They're all under 7,000 yards long. They are 3 of the 4 shortest courses on the PGA Tour. The second shortest being the TPC River Highlands course for the Travelers Championship out there in Connecticut, but the shortest course on tour is Pebble Beach. And then Spyglass comes in at third longest, or third shortest, I should say. Monterey Peninsula coming in at the 4th shortest. That one, what's really crazy about this is the Pebble Beach and Spyglass are both par 72s. Monterey Peninsula is par 71, and it's a very, very, very unique setup. We only have the strokes gain data on Pebble Beach, but when you look at the percentage of strokes taken compared to average for a PGA Tour event, Pebble Beach rates out number 1 in the most amount of wedge shots taken, or approach shots taken 125 yards or shorter, and it's one of the lowest for approach strokes 150 to 175 yards, which is usually a pretty common range. It's very, very short, and there are lots of short par 4s. Whole bunch of par 4s under 400 yards in length. If you go to the fantasy scoring section, we're going to have it set up the same way as we did the Desert Classic. Instead of looking at one round and making a course projected score for one round, we're going to have to look at all 4 days with all the hole types added up. And usually, the most common hole types are either medium par 4s or long par 4s. Well, this week there are 19 short par 4s, 12 medium length par 4s, and 8 long par 4s. It's not the par 3s that are short, and we have 10 long par 3s compared to the 7 short par 3s. And there are a bunch of shorter par 5s, 10 of those compared to the 6 long par 5s. But the big story here is the short par 4s, and the thing is, almost none of them are drivable. So a lot of them are just going to be wide open, just hit whatever approach or whatever drive you want. Just put it wherever you want on the fairway, and it's going to be all about those wedge shots. Going to come in very handy there. A lot of the shorter hitters are going to be in play. When I ran my analysis on looking at season-long averages and correlating them with fantasy point scoring at tournaments over the last 5 or 6 years, this course rated out number 1 in correlation with just straight-up average strokes gained to the field, just overall, more than any other course, and number 3 in driving accuracy. So, this is almost the definition of a accuracy course, but not quite by design. Well, I mean, it is by design, but it's not like other accuracy courses where you really, really can't miss the green. It's just that it's so short. I mean, it's very penal, and especially this week, it's going to be penal if you miss the greens. But it's really the fact that you just want to be able to place your approach shot in the most appropriate areas on the fairway, because with Pebble especially, the greens are very small. If you look at all of the courses on the PGA Tour, yet another thing that Pebble Beach ranks out number 1 in is the smallest greens, only 3,500 yards squared, or feet squared on the greens. Spyglass is somewhat small too, with 5,000, and Monterey's pretty average at 6,000. It's Pebble especially, really tiny greens, and the greens are often very well protected with lots of bunkers. You might want to look a little bit at things like sand saves, but I think strokes gained around the green, especially if your guys are kind of a poor approach game, I think that's going to come into play here a lot. These are Apoa Anua greens, and they're very slow, about 10.5 on the stimp meter or so. Sometimes getting up to 12. It just really depends on the year. About a medium firmness for the greens, and with it being POA, POA kind of adds a little bit more kind of randomness to the greens. A bit hard to read, but some guys do a lot better on POA. But with it being slower, and especially with all the rain in the forecast I'm about to talk about here, your good putters are going to have a little bit more of an advantage than they normally would. Still not a place I like to attack a whole lot, but just something to really note there. And another thing that sticks out with Pebble Beach is driving distance on accuracy is the lowest of any course that there is, 269 yards on average. Compare that to Monterey Peninsula, that averages 295 yards in driving distance, with Spyglass coming in at 288 yards. The course is going to play quite a bit different. Now, like I had mentioned, last few days it had been raining an awful lot. The rain's going to subside for now, and then come back on Friday and on Sunday. But with this being a coastal event, another thing that comes into play big time is the wind. It's going to be fairly windy for a few of these days, and that forecast will kind of change a lot as we look into things. But Pebble and Monterey especially are kind of wide open out there. Monterey is supposed to be the easier course. Has the much higher greens and regulation percentage. Driving accuracy percentage actually ranks third overall in driving accuracy percentage at 74%. And like I said, they're bombing it out there a lot more. And that course actually has a good amount of tree coverage. It's Spyglass and Pebble in particular. The reason that these courses aren't just torn up and the scores actually stay right around par is because the wind is just such a major factor, and it can vary from day to day. Be sure to keep your eyes on the weather at all times. And there aren't too many birdies to be had, really, or eagles for that matter, at Pebble Beach. It can be kind of a par fest. And at the same time, you can also run into some bogeys. Not really big on the double bogeys or anything this week. Just, this is a course where you definitely want to tread water at a lot, especially if things do pick up. But, just overall, what I'm seeing here is with the tiny greens and basically being able to hit it wherever you want, the Bombers are not going to be able to flex their advantage like they usually would. And you almost kind of want to look for guys with maybe lower ball flights. That might be overthinking a little bit, but it does help here. You'd think that European guys used to playing out in the wind and the rain and all that would have an advantage. But this course has actually been quite dominated by Americans here in the past, and you'll see a lot of the same names that pop up just in the course history section. A lot of guys do well here year after year after year. So we're gonna want to look at course history a little bit more than we usually would, and it's a full-size field, 156 players in the field. Things have been shaken up quite a bit, honestly. We've got a lot of withdrawals and a lot of replacements. So you'll see a lot of the guys in the DraftKings lobby listed as out. But, of course, the Domination Station always has that right up to date. And we're going to be seeing some line movement. We've already seen significant line movement on some people. But I expect as the weather either improves or gets worse, we'll see the top of the field kind of either fall or fade. If the weather gets worse, what we'll see is the odds will become a little more even. The favorites might be a little less favorited. But right now, we've got Dustin Johnson at like 6-1, 5-1, depending on where you're looking. He seems like a clear favorite here after his win last week. And, him and Day have extremely good history here. That's kind of the tail up top. But we'll get into the players here in a little bit. Just overall as a field, the more variance that we run into this week, the more that we're going to want to fade the chalk, and more we're going to want to find just guys that are going to be overlooked to play. And I would definitely consider adding playing some of the guys that were kind of added late into the field here. They might have a little bit of an advantage going on, but it's not like it's going to be updated tomorrow with like some of the guys that you replace the withdrawals. It's not really going to happen like that, but that shouldn't really affect things too much. This field really looks like the field is quite strong if you look at the top, DJ and Day, but it kind of quickly falls off and becomes a somewhat mediocre field in strength. If you look at last year and go by our field strength metrics, Pebble Beach actually came in at -4%, so 4% weaker than the average field, which is kind of shocking because it's a bigger event. It's just that a lot of guys, a lot of your big European guys usually wait a couple of weeks till the Honda before they make the trek over, and we see more of your bigger names playing. Maybe like the Farmers or the Waste Management over the last few weeks. Pebble can be really annoying with the amateur setup of it. And how that works pretty much is the pros will be playing their own individual stroke play, while the amateurs will play the first 3 days. And they'll be competing against each other as groups of two. And it's a completely different competition. I kind of would lean towards guys with maybe better temperament because it's going to be kind of a struggle out there this week. Lots of distractions with the Pro-Am nature of things. I know last week there were tons of distractions, but Pro-Ams usually are a mess. My rule of thumb with Pro-Ams are, I love going to Pro-Ams. They're the best part of a tournament, just not when the entire tournament's a Pro-Am. I don't like that. So one last thing I really need to point out here. This is you get 3 rounds for free for all of your guys. So it's sort of a hybrid between a no-cut event and a regular cut event. It's a full field, which you don't see at no-cut events, but since they all get 3 rounds of scoring guaranteed, you are going to want to look at things like average fantasy points gained, birdies, or better gained. Those are going to be very helpful stats, and sometimes that can lend itself to your bigger bombers and things like that, but really want to look at the projected round score, projected fantasy point scoring per round, because that factors in all these short par 4s, and it kind of changes the results up quite a bit. Definitely going to want to attack the guys that are good in that range. And as far as strokes gained goes, approach, especially with your wedges. You might want to look into the stat. I think they have the stat like approaches 50 to 150 yards or 50 to 125 yards or something. Gonna want to look at who's good with their wedge play, but generally you kind of get an idea of who's good with their wedge play. But approach overall going to be important, and strokes gained around the green and putting going to matter a lot more than they did last week, where they were pretty much non-factors. We're definitely going to want to look at this week. And guys' POA splits. There's some guys that are really bad on POA greens, and other guys that really stick out as good POA putters. And I always like looking at those types of splits more on POA than your more typical Bermuda bent grass type greens, because it's really kind of unique, sort of like the paspalum grass type. You really see some guys that do stick out as better putters on POA, and that's just something I like to keep an eye on. But again, the main focus is this week course history, fantasy scoring for all the different hole types, because it's such an atypical event. Driving accuracy is going to be important. Driving distance pretty much goes out the window, and you want good recent form. The West Coast swing, probably more than any other swing. Maybe you could argue Texas or Florida, but definitely the West Coast swing really has its it really, like, people that come in with good form in the West Coast and just do well in the West Coast in general are guys you want to be attacking here. It's just more than any other region. I like to check those sort of things out. We've got the split on the field rank splits. You can see how everyone's done specifically on West Coast events. And you can see how some guys like Jason Day just absolutely kill it. And I guess the last thing I will mention before getting into the big player pool is this will be a top 60 in ties at the end of 3 days. So even though you get the 3 rounds for free, it's very important to kind of look at guys that are more likely to really make the cut than guys that just like to squeak in there. If you look at the field rank tracker, you can see, or just the field rank splits, top 50% rate. I like that stat a lot instead of just looking at made cut percentage. That tracks how often guys come in the top 50% of fields, and it's actually, I think it's going to be the top 40% that make it in. So you can even look at top 25% rate as well. You always want guys that have a chance of coming in the top 25% of the field. Those are going to be the ones that score well, fantasy wise. But just making the cut really isn't going to make too much of a difference this week. It's nice to have the extra round in there, but I also think that 5 out of 6 lineups have much more of a chance than they usually do. You got some short par 5s that you can really score some eagles on. Not really the par 4s, even though they are short, but birdies and eagles can be in play here. And you could possibly win a tournament with a guy that misses the cut if things line up for them just right. So going into the player pool here, starting off with Dustin Johnson and Jason Day, like I said, and their course history here is quite immaculate. They both have missed cuts fairly recently, DJ in 2013 and Jason Day in 2014. Now, Day is coming in off of just really solid form. DJ made 92% of his cuts over the last year, Jason Day 86%, but Day pretty much never rates out all that well. He just ends up doing well. It's mostly through the short game. His approach game has been mediocre at best, and that's been the reason that statistically, Day never really pops out that much. But he overcomes what he lacks in statistics, or the general statistics that we look for, and he's put up just solid effort after solid effort. 5th at the CJ Cup. 11th at the WGC event over the swing season, most recently 5th at the Farmers Open, where he also had really good course history at. In 3 West Coast events over the last year, his field rank splits are 99%, pretty much always top 5. And that would include the runner-up last year, where he tied with DJ and Chez as well. We'll get to Phil Mickelson as well. There's quite a lot of guys that came runner-up last year, but DJ, he has 5 top 5 since 2012. He hasn't won recently, but still just always just blowing it up here. And that even though he would come runner up, he's leading that field in fantasy points. That's just how it is. That's how Dustin Johnson does. He eagles like crazy. His approach splits are just insane. Doesn't matter how far you go back. He is just anything tee to green. He does it for you. His distance advantage, which actually, his distance only 2 yards longer than Day this year. But that advantage is sort of negated. He's coming in with better greens regulation numbers, but the same driving accuracy at 57%. Not gaining quite as many birdies, but still just gaining the fantasy points overall from those big, huge wins. Probably a lot of it due to like winning things like the Canadian Open, which is like the highest scoring event fantasy point wise with all the eagles and par fives and stuff. And he's just really good overall, as where Jason Day kind of is more short game oriented, putting oriented. Tends to spray it off the tee a little bit more than DJ does. And, Dustin Johnson's coming in number 1 in the fantasy scoring splits. Just over Tommy Fleetwood, who we'll talk about here soon. And, Jason Day, JD, I guess DJ to JD is the comparison I'm making here. JD is coming in at 7th in that regard. Averages 0.1 less fantasy points per hole. DJ's number 1 in the field at 1.06. Jason Day's coming in at 0.96. So, I mean, most things point to Dustin Johnson being the stronger overall play of the big course horses here. But, he's 11-4 on DraftKings, 12-4 on FanDuel. As where Jason Day is 10-9 on DraftKings, 11-7 on FanDuel. So, I mean, FanDuel Day makes a lot more sense as where DJ is probably going to be a better play on DraftKings, but at the same time, you can afford more on FanDuel generally than you can on DraftKings with higher salary cap and more value usually, but you're still going to want to just get a lot of DJ. He's going to get fairly chalky even with the price, which it just makes sense. He's freaking DJ. He's so good. We most recently saw him on tour finishing 4th in the Tournament of Champions, but he's actually coming in off of a win in Saudi Arabia last week, and that's a place where we saw Sergio Garcia go quite nuts, destroy some stuff, but he's not in the field, so who cares? We'll get on that in a little bit. Just a funny story with that. Jason Day, like I said, just riding some pretty decent form, tons and tons of top 20s since the major swing last year. And he does it all sort of flying a bit under the radar and coming in a little underpriced, but his price is definitely priced up here. The course history is pretty much the same for these guys. Just years and years after years of dominance here at this course. A few other guys like that, Phil, Spieth, and we'll get to them, but they're the cream of the crop. They're the only ones under 20-1 right now, and they're right now Day's 9-1, DJ 6-1. So these are the clear favorites. Spending up is pretty easy. Just pick one of your favorites. These guys, really anyone in the 10K range, kind of has a solid case for them, one way or another. Day's going to come in with lower ownership, as where DJ probably has more GPP upside, and honestly is probably more cash safe as well. Now, I'm going to talk about the rest of this 10K range before cutting it off for our VIP members here shortly. And we'll get right back to that after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.
Alrighty, so moving on down along to this next little range right here, you finally got Tony Finau. Not only priced appropriately, I'd say he's overpriced at this point. It's only $300 cheaper on DraftKings than Jason Day, but he's coming in at 20-1, compared to Day's 8-1 here. And it's because he's coming off the missed cut last week at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, where he was, as usual, among the highest owned, second highest in most tournaments, like 27% or so, give or take, depending on what tournament you were in. Now with such a big price tag on, especially on DraftKings, a little bit more than FanDuel. On FanDuel, he's got like 3 or 4 guys priced up higher than him compared to DraftKings, where he is just third on the board, higher than guys like Fleetwood and Kuchar and Mickelson. Now, he's only played here once. He finished 23rd in 2017. And really, before his miscut last week, he was doing just fine. 13th at the Farmers, 16th at the Mayakoba Classic, runner-up at the WGC event. Now, he comes in 4th overall, the fantasy scoring projections, and as far as field rank and everything goes, he rates out just well. It's just, he's usually able to flex his driver, which is right there in between Day and Johnson for distance, with actually a little bit better driving accuracy. It's just the price and the fact that he's coming off a miscut. They'll finally knock him under 20% owned and into the teens probably, or as we see sometimes with chalk that gets busted, everyone just abandons him immediately, especially when the price goes up like this. It could be like that, but it's still Finau. He's always still super popular. I hate the fact that he's been losing strokes approach over his last 10 rounds. That's not very good to see. Also losing stroke putting in that same split. So, it feels kind of noobish to get off of Finau with the one missed cut, but I don't think he rates out all that well here either. Now, for what it's worth, he had missed 3 straight cuts going into the Waste Management Open, Phoenix Open last week, and he missed the cut yet again. So, we see guys like Woodland a few weeks ago missed a cut at a place where he had just awful course history, and then bounce right back. That could happen for Finau. I'm definitely going to try to get my shares over on FanDuel more than DraftKings, where we have to pay up like Jason Day money to get to him. And I'm more of a fan of the next guy we're going to talk about anyway. So, like I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, this tournament's usually almost always won by an American, but I really like my boy Tommy Fleetwood. 10,300 on DraftKings, 11.5 on FanDuel. Quite pricey on FanDuel, which is weird because they would always seriously undervalue him over there. But FanDuel finally figured out that the European Tour is a thing. So, yeah, that kind of sucks, but it is nice to see FanDuel get a little better with their pricing. So, we had most recently seen him. He'd been on the European Tour for a little bit, only stopping by, not even America, stopped by China for the WGC HSBC Championship recently and finished 7th in that. Wasn't bad. He's been riding some solid form for quite a while, ever since the Open Championship. It was a streak of top 30 finishes for him. Just reading off the his finishes since then, 24th at the Dell Technologies, 8th at the BMW Championship, and 11th at the Tour Championship. Now, there were some smaller kind of fields there. But then he went to Europe, runner-up at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship, which in the strongest of events, 9th at the Sky Sports British Masters, then 7th at the WGC event, like I had said, 7th at the Turkish Airlines Open, not too strong there, then 16th in the World Tour Championship in Dubai, and then 14th at the Hong Kong Open, again, not too strong. And then he tried to three-peat, which is just something you can never do anymore, I guess, because he tried to three-peat at his tournament, the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship, which is pretty much the opposite of this course in every way, because it's like the longest course that there is, like 7,800 yards. This one is far shorter, about 1,000 yards shorter. And he ended up finishing 42nd there, but that's not bad considering all the other guys have tried to three-peat over the last year or so. They usually crash and burn. And he sort of recovered with a 16th at the Omega Dubai Desert Classic. So he'd spent some time in Europe in the desert most recently, flying around Asia and all that. But he is here, and he is probably getting ready for the U.S. Open this year that will be hosted right here at Pebble Beach. It's going to be a quick turnaround, them hosting this tournament, and then directly going into hosting a major tournament. So things could be a little bit different here at Pebble Beach, but I expect them to just get right to work on it right after this tournament's done. Got a little bit of time to set it up here with the USGA and all of that, but it makes sense that Fleetwood's here. He's definitely major seeking. He's especially at the U.S. Open where he's really been competing the last few years. So Fleetwood, I really, really like this play a lot. If you go to the fantasy scoring section, Fleetwood rates out number 2 overall, and it's the short par 5s that he really, really capitalizes on. Over the last year, he's facing 90 of them and averages 2.6 DraftKings points per, and that's the best in the entire field of anyone with any sort of sample size. Number 1 would be David Duval, who has all of 2 holes. So the sample size is just not very good there. If you look at the studs, he's clearly the best at the short par 5s, which is where you're going to get a lot of your fantasy scoring done. The short par 5s are actually a bit of a struggle for him, but he's not too far off from a lot of the other studs here in this field. Doesn't really struggle too much in that. Just really solid overall. Just a good birdie maker, good at gaining birdies to the field, leads that category over guys like DJ, over guys like Jason Day. And his season last year was quite immaculate. Made 92% of his cuts, which was the same as Dustin Johnson. That's just looking at full field events too. He did well in his no cuts as well. Now, he only played one event in the West Coast last year, and it was the Genesis Open where he did finish runner-up. So that's not bad at all. That's quite wonderful, honestly. I don't know about the carryover from here to the Genesis, but still to the West Coast swing. I think it's different green types. It's not Poe over there, but still, Fleetwood just time after time after time, he would just really come through. Broke all expectations that we had with him coming into the year, and those were pretty lofty in the first place. 82% adjusted field rank over the last season, and that's bested only by one Mr. Dustin Johnson there, so that's not bad company to be in. It rates out well statistically and all the things that we're looking at. One of the few guys to gain strokes in just every category. Just really solid plays from Mr. Tommy Fleetwood. He's a fellow long hair aficionado. Love the guy. Yeah, I told the story before, but I saw him at the one of his only missed cuts from last year, actually, the Wells Fargo Championship. Talked a few times, talked about his Abu Dhabi success. I think he was just somewhat fresh off of a win there as well last year, and then actually went to see the WGC Bridgestone as well, and he was on the tee, and he actually remembered me and said hi, which was pretty cool. So I love Tommy for that. Slightly biased. He's kind of up there with like CT Pan and Henrik Stenson, where I'm getting quite biased, but he honestly does rate out really, really well for me in a lot of categories. And yeah, I love Mr. Tommy Fleetwood this week. I love him a lot. And to finish off this section of the podcast, got to talk about Matt Kuchar. Not many guys are in better form than him. It's really hard to think of anyone. He almost won for his 3rd time in the last since the Mayakoba Classic, which was in November. I mean, that's just incredible form. 3 out of 4 tournaments where he's just destroyed. And with the other one being the Tournament of Champions, that's not really that serious of an event in the first place. But yeah, 4th at the Waste Management last week. Him and pretty much everyone just sucked on Sunday last week. I forgot to mention how well we did overall. With the tournament last week, we were really on point. We had Justin Thomas and Ricky Fowler as our biggest plays up top, and they really came through. I had written up my coach notes, which should definitely check out sometime soon once I have those up. You can get all of our opinions from all the different golf coaches in one convenient section that comes a part of your premium membership with dfsarmy.com. Hint, hint, promo code TACO. Definitely something you want to use there. But yeah, I had Dahmen as a big fade, and I had pointed that out, and he ended up taking a lot of the chalk with him. And really a lot of the fades, except for Bubba, were pretty much on point last week. Just hoping to keep it going this week now. But with Matt Kuchar, just, he was really, really bad on Sunday. Maybe a lot of people saw that, and maybe they'll look at his course history here and see the 62nd and the miscut and go, yikes. But the dude's form still unbelievable. You take out that, what was it, like +4, +5 on Sunday, and the dude's in like electric form coming in. He was a guy that, would just not win. He hadn't won since, like, I don't know, the Texas Open in like 2013, but 6 years later, he's back on form and won the Mayakoba Classic and then won the first event of the season officially, the Sony Open, and just looked incredible out there. Looked 10 years younger, honestly. And now he's at a course where, driving distance isn't in play. Driving accuracy is. I mean, come on, that's it's almost a recipe for success with Kuchar, but unlike him being in the 7K range, now he's in the 10K range up here with the big boys. Gonna be hard to afford him, but you should definitely have some exposure to him just because of how he's been playing. Rates out really well. I mentioned temperament earlier, and he is one of the most steady veterans that we have on tour. Dustin Johnson's going to have the likes of Wayne Gretzky chilling with him. Kuchar will actually have one of our own DFS Army members out there helping him out. Maybe perhaps Loki sweating him a little bit. Don't want to jinx too much, but I have a really good feeling about Kuchar, and I'm definitely going to show a little support his way. And that pretty much does it for the 10K section. If you want to check out the rest of the podcast here, be sure to sign up, dfsarmy.com. Promo code TACO will get you a lifetime 20% decimation. Of course, decimation technically means killing off 10%. So that's your little vocabulary lesson for the day. I know decimate usually just means more like eviscerate, literally, but you can get a 20% decimation off your price by just using the promo code TACO, which supports the pod. And again, you get access to all of our premium tools for all the daily fantasy sports. It's a really good deal, really cheap price. Come check us out. Use that link in the description. And again, promo code TACO. And we will be right back for all of you lovely DFS Army VIP members in just a second.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.